For a moment, let's turn our attention to some economic data now, and Busisiwe Radebe joins me now for a look at some of the economic news and data from the past week and what we can expect next week, right? Awesome. Busi, let's kick off with the local manufacturing data. We know that there's always a report that local manufacturing in South Africa is just not picking up, but I understand we saw a slight change in the month of June.
And I mean, that surprised the markets completely. I think they were expecting a decline of 2.1% year on year, and we actually saw an increase of 0.5%. Even on the quarterly basis, it was just a slight decline on a quarter-on-quarter basis, seasonally adjusted. Even when you look at half year, I think it was only down 0.1% year on year. So there was a slight improvement there. There's nothing to really get excited about. Yes, it did surprise to the upside there, but I mean, if you just think about it, the production side of the economy is still struggling quite a lot. I think we also next week just have mining left over. Then we'll know actually for the sort of second quarter more or less what we can expect GDP-wise. But this was actually a step in sort of the right direction. It was sort of an improvement, but it doesn't mean that, oh, the economy is doing wonderfully.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that at all. And if you just look growth-wise, this means that maybe instead of that minus 0.6% growth that it's not in growth, a decline that we saw in the first quarter, we're actually going to see an improvement this quarter, and we think that is something like 1.4%. You know, so quarter on quarter. So it's quite a nice little improvement there, but still weak. It's still absolutely weak.
Nowhere near the levels where we should actually be.
Nowhere near the levels where we should actually be. I mean, when we think about sort of, I think it was the first quarter, because it was the mining strike that had a big impact there, and I saw sort of figures that said if you just stripped out that huge decline in mining, we actually did see growth of about 2%.
Whoa.
That's what they said, but if you look at this quarter, and our forecast says, listen, we're only going to see growth on a quarter-to-quarter basis of only about 1.4%, so we're nowhere near where we need to be. Employment still, we saw an increase. I mean, it was what, 2 weeks ago? We saw an unemployment rate increase, so it's not doing wonderfully, but this is an improvement and it is a step in the right direction.
Well, we certainly hope so, because you also make mention of the fact that the strikes no doubt impacted on both manufacturing and mining, and I understand those two composites make up for a big chunk with regard to SA's GDP contribution.
Absolutely, they make a big chunk. I mean, if you just even look at the unemployment figures, because I think it was the second quarter that actually came out, and we thought, oh my word, we're going to see huge numbers of people being unemployed in sort of the mining sector and sort of manufacturing, but we saw a lot of it was actually coming from manufacturing. Not only do they make a big chunk of it, but they actually just feed into each other. So we saw the most jobs lost in the second quarter was from manufacturing, and you're wondering, oh, but mining, we had all that nonsense there, why aren't we seeing any job losses there? But that will obviously come out. They won't strike, so I can't fire anyone. There aren't really changes happening when people are on strike. We're going to start seeing that in the third quarter, so that is a huge drag on growth, because we're going to have to see it somehow. You couldn't see it in the second quarter. We saw it coming through in manufacturing, and we're going to see it sort of coming through probably in the third quarter. So huge chunk. I think mining makes up something like what, 9.2% of our GDP. So it is quite a heavy little bit that we're going on there.
Just to sidestep for a moment, the SARB and the IMF have both downgraded SA's outlook for this year's GDP growth, I think, to 1.7%. Is that in line with Nedbank's estimations?
It's more or less in line with Nedbank's estimation. I mean, it's actually slower than last year. It is more in line with our expectations, but you can see what has happened this year. I think we're going to see, I mean, we haven't seen great figures sort of for the first quarter, and our figure for the second quarter is not growth, sort of wonderful growth-wise, but we're going to probably see some improvement come through in the sort of second, third and fourth quarters out there. But if you look at it carefully, you see what's going on overseas. It also falls into our PMIs. If you look at sort of our weaker rand, that falls into manufacturing. With a weaker rand, you can probably, without any strikes or anything like that, you can probably export more, and maybe we're going to see some growth pick up. It has to. If you want to come to that 1.7 to about 1.9%, it has to pick up in the third and fourth quarters. You have to see growth picking up there. We're going to see some improvements from a weaker rand, and obviously from our trading partners doing marginally better in the second half of the year.
You mentioned a trading partner there, and one of our biggest trading partners is Europe. They also have their own economic issues that they're trying to navigate through, and just yesterday Mario Draghi and his team with the ECB making mention, or rather still dovish, no increase in interest rates because there's still concerns about deflation or inflation concerns going in the opposite direction, as well as they want to see their currency, the euro, weakened quite significantly in order to encourage growth there.
I mean, if just dovetailing onto our little manufacturing pieces, what we also saw come out this week is a lot of PMI figures, and some of the PMI figures also from the Eurozone actually came out. But I just want to just highlight a little difference here. JP Morgan actually also had a global PMI come out, And this global PMI, it was also this week I think, this global PMI more or less tells us manufacturing-wise how we have done as sort of on a global level. And the big little little differences you see there is that developing nations were also struggling. You can see our PMI, I think it was 46.6 for July. We were struggling in that little bit there, but you saw that developed nations PMI started looking better, including the Eurozone. I think except for France and Greece that were doing slightly worse there. The Eurozone, I think for 13th consecutive month or something, we saw improvement in PMIs there. So it's still patchy, but there is an improvement coming through there. Obviously, it's going to feed into what's happening on this side because it is one of our biggest trading partners. If manufacturing is starting to pick up and the economy in the Eurozone is starting to slightly pick up, we're going to actually be beneficiaries of that. So we're hoping to be, you know, I suppose there are two things you can look at here. You could see what's happening internationally and say, okay, are we going to get some benefits from what's happening internationally? And then you have to also see what's happening domestically. Are we going to benefit from anything special happening domestically? Right now, the domestic situation is a bit shaky still, but if you look at those figures and say, okay, there are worries still, growth is still patchy in the Eurozone, but there are these sort of green sort of shoots of improvement there, and we're actually going to benefit from that, we hope, unless we got another big strike or something.
Oh, we certainly hope not, we'll see. But it certainly looks, in my mind, I've got a picture of a puzzle where some parts are coming together, but there are so many other missing pieces, and hopefully we manage to put those in place. Thank you so much for your time today, as always. That was Busisiwe Radebe, an economist from Nedbank.